They said Tudor England was a land of law and faith, but every stone under Henry VIII's throne was soaked in fear. No one was safe. Not the noble, not the priest, not the servant, and least of all, any woman who dared to speak with a voice louder than a whisper. To defy the king was treason. To defy the church was heresy. And to defy both was a death sentence carved into the soul long before the axe ever touched flesh. And Askew learned this truth slowly, painfully, and then all at once. She was born into a world that demanded silence from women, obedience from daughters, submission from wives. But Anne had something Tudor England feared above everything except plague and war. She had conviction, a mind that refused to bend, a tongue that refused to lie, and a faith that did not match the king's shift from Catholic to Protestant and back again as he reshaped England to suit his own fury and appetite. Anne did not begin life as a rebel. She began it as a daughter of Lincolnshire, raised among the gentry, educated far beyond what the era expected of a woman. She read scripture in English. She questioned the priests. She debated men who expected her to only smile and agree. In a different age, she might have become a scholar. But in Tudor England, a woman who thought too deeply was a threat waiting to bloom. Her marriage was forced upon her. She had been promised to one sister but married to another when death disrupted the arrangement. Her husband believed obedience was a virtue and resistance was a sin. He expected her to abandon her reading and accept the old church teachings. Anne refused, and refusal made her dangerous. Not because her husband feared losing authority, but because defiance in a household always found its way to the ears of London. And London was a city where a whisper could ignite an inquisition. Anne fled the marriage. She went to London not to hide, but to speak. She began distributing forbidden texts. She discussed scripture openly. She quoted ideas that the king and his council considered heresy. She spoke with the boldness of a man. Worse, she spoke with the boldness of someone who believed her words mattered. The court watched her. The bishops watched her. Even those close to Queen Catherine Parr watched her, because the Queen herself walked a thin line between reform and ruin. The reformist women whispered in name and admiration. The conservatives whispered it in warning. Henry VIII was nearing his end. His paranoia grew sharper than any blade, and Anne Askew walked willingly into the shadow of a dying tyrant. The first arrest came quietly. She was taken, questioned, and commanded to reveal the names of noblewomen who shared her beliefs. She refused. They threatened her. She refused. They imprisoned her. But she spoke with calm defiance. She quoted scripture to her interrogators, answering their accusations with verses that unsettled them. She was released, but not forgiven. She had become a target. The second arrest came with chains. This time they did not want her beliefs, they wanted her allies. They wanted proof to destroy Queen Catherine Parr, whom the conservatives despised. They believed Anne would break under pressure, that a woman would crumble faster than a man. But Anne Askew offered them nothing. They locked her in Newgate, a place where the air itself rotted, where prisoners screamed through cracked stone, where rats crawled over sleeping bodies and disease walked as freely as guards. She survived because she was not afraid of pain. She was afraid of betraying innocent women to save herself, and that fear was stronger. The council grew desperate. Anne Askew had become a symbol, a stubborn ghost in human form, a woman who stood against bishops, lords, and the king himself without trembling. They needed her broken, they needed her silenced, they needed her humiliated. So they dragged her to the Tower of London. The few who entered the tower left with their spirit intact. The walls were thick with secrets. The stairs worn down by footsteps of the condemned, air tasted of iron and smoke and despair. The tower was not built to imprison the body, it was built to devour the soul. And waiting inside was the device they believed no woman could survive, the rack. No English woman had ever been tortured on it. The law forbade such brutality. But laws in Tudor England bent when the throne demanded a confession, and understood the moment she saw it that she would not leave the tower hole. But she also understood something far more terrifying. They did not want her confession, they wanted her destruction. They fastened her wrists, they tied her ankles, they tightened the ropes until her bones groaned. Then the turning began, slowly at first, like a ritual, then harder, as if they wished to tear faith from her flesh. Bones separated from joints, muscles ripped, tendons tore like cloth. Her limbs stretched until the pain rose beyond screaming. And still she did not break. She did not name the queen, she did not name the noblewomen, she did not name a single soul. Her interrogators grew furious, they demanded she speak. She answered with silence, they demanded she recant. She answered with scripture, they demanded she surrender. She answered with a calm that terrified them more than any scream. When her body finally gave way, it did not break her, it revealed her. She had become something the council of men feared more than heresy itself, a woman who could not be controlled. When they were finished, she could no longer walk. Her legs hung useless, her arms were ruined. They had tried to destroy her with pain, but pain only carved her resolve into something unshakable. The execution was set, and it would not be merciful. Anne Askew was carried to Smithfield Market in a chair. Tudor crowds gathered expecting fear, trembling, or begging. Instead, they saw a woman who looked almost serene. They tied her to the stake because she could not stand. They placed a barrel of gunpowder around her neck to speed her death. But even that was an act of cruelty disguised as mercy. They wanted a spectacle. They wanted the smoke from her burning to carry a warning across London. But Anne Askew refused to give them a show of terror. She spoke softly as flames were lit beneath her, her voice steady despite her broken body, not pleading, not cursing, simply speaking truth in a city built on lies. The fire rose, the gunpowder cracked, and the most horrific death inflicted on a woman in Tudor England became a shadow that would haunt the realm long after Henry VIII was gone. This was not the death of a heretic. This was the killing of a woman who refused to kneel. They called it justice, but everyone who witnessed the death of Anne Askew felt something colder than law stirring in the air. The fire had barely died before rumors ignited, spreading through London like sparks on dry thatch. Some whispered that her voice had not cracked even as the flames climbed her broken limbs. Others swore that a strange calm had settled over the square, as if heaven itself held its breath. The council tried to bury her memory beneath proclamations and sermons, but the city had already begun to carry her story from market stalls to palace corridors. London had seen many burnings, but none like hers. The woman they destroyed refused to be forgotten. As her ashes cooled, the men who condemned her retreated into the shadowed halls of power. They expected relief. Instead, they felt something like dread. They had meant to make an example of her, but instead they had created a martyr whose courage exposed the cruelty of their authority. They whispered to one another that she should have broken, that no woman could endure such pain without losing her sanity. They wondered what kind of strength lived inside her, what kind of conviction kept her silent through torture designed to tear the human soul into pieces. They wondered if they had burned a heretic or forged a legend. But the truth of Anne Askew's fate did not end at the stake. What followed was not peace, it was fear. The tower guards who escorted her to her final night spoke of strange quiet in the halls, a stillness even the ravens avoided. They said the torches burned low as if shrinking from the fate that awaited her. Some swore that as she was carried away, her eyes were not filled with terror but with something colder, something that made hardened men look away. London carried on, but the story clung to its stones. Women spoke of her in hushed tones, not out of fear but out of something approaching reverence. Men debated her defiance, some calling her foolish, others calling her brave, but all remembering her name. The court panicked. A dead woman had begun to gather more influence than a living one. They needed to silence her memory, to bury her defiance beneath state-approved truth. They tried twisting her story into a warning, but every attempt only sharpened the contrast between their cruelty and her strength. The truth was simple. Tudor England had wanted her silence. Instead, they amplified her voice. In the weeks after her execution, the city changed. Priests altered their sermons. Some avoided the subject entirely. Others spoke of her as a cautionary tale. But the congregation listened differently. They watched differently. Anne Askew had shown them what authority looked like when stripped of its robes and ritual. It looked afraid. Those who interrogated her began to unravel. The men who turned the rack felt their hands tremble in confession, though they admitted nothing publicly. One guard left his post and vanished into the countryside. Another was discovered praying alone in the Tower Chapel until dawn, muttering that he had seen something he refused to name. Even the Lord Chancellor felt the weight of her silence pressing on him. Her refusal to break under torture became a mirror he avoided. He had expected victory. What he felt was judgment. The court tried to smother the story with the force of the crown, but a kingdom built on fear cannot erase a woman who met fear and did not bow. And so whispers grew, whispers that she had smiled in her final moments, that the smoke had curled upward like a blessing instead of a curse, that even the flames seemed hesitant before touching her. Centuries would pass before historians gave shape to the brutality inflicted on her. But in the year of her death, the truth needed no ink. It spread through human breath, through trembling lips, through the memory of a woman who had endured the unendurable. She had been bound to a rack meant to break bone from bone. She had been questioned by men who believed themselves the owners of her fate. She had been sentenced by a kingdom that feared her truth more than its own sins. And still she walked to the fire in a chair, broken but unbowed. What frightened the council most was not her defiance, it was her calmness. They expected pleading, they received composure. They expected hysterics, they received clarity. They expected submission, they received something terrifying in its simplicity. A woman who believed that death was preferable to dishonor. The night before her execution, the tower warden heard her murmuring scripture, not with the voice of someone desperate for salvation, but with the certainty of someone who already understood it. She asked for no mercy, she offered no confession. Even the guards, hardened by years of escorting prisoners to their doom, felt unsettled by the peace in her voice. It was not the peace of a broken mind, but of a sharpened purpose. When they carried her out for execution, the crowd fell quiet. Londoners accustomed to spectacle felt something different in the air. Not anticipation, but solemnity. As they bound her to the stake, gentle hands touched her shattered limbs, not out of pity, but out of reverence. They expected a scream when the flames rose. Instead, they heard her speak, softly, steadily, as if pain itself bowed before her. This terrified the men in power more than any confession she refused to give. The fire consumed her body but fed her myth. In the days that followed, her name was spoken in secret circles. Women saw in her a strength denied to them by law, church, and husband. Men saw in her a courage they wished they possessed. Even the priests who condemned her could not erase the unsettling truth she left behind, that a woman with a broken body could possess a spirit stronger than the empire that killed her. The king never spoke her name again, but those close to him claimed that he grew restless whenever London whispered he felt her absence like a splinter under the crown. Her story became a ghost that haunted his final days, a reminder that even a monarch with absolute power could not fully silence a voice once it had touched truth. The Tower never forgot her. When the next prisoners walked its stone halls, guards spoke quietly of Anne Askew. Some claimed the cell she once occupied felt colder than the others. Others swore they heard faint footsteps on nights when no one walked. Of course, such things cannot be proven, but legends do not require proof, they require fear. And she had given England enough to last centuries. Anne Askew's death did not end her story. It began a slow and dangerous shift in the kingdom conscience. A realization that the fire meant to destroy her had instead illuminated the cruelty of those who wielded it. And though she did not live to see it, her refusal to break carved fractures into the foundations of Tudor authority. Her voice, silenced by flame, echoed across decades in the reforms that followed. In the slow erosion of unchecked power, in the growing belief that even the common soul held worth, the council had tortured her body. But they had strengthened her legacy. The fire had devoured her flesh, but it could not consume her truth. And so Anne Askew became something the crown could not imprison, torture, or kill. She became a reminder that even in a world ruled by fear, controlled by kings, shaped by men, there would always be women who refused to kneel. A reminder that truth spoken softly could outlast a throne. A reminder that courage born in suffering could ignite generations. Anne Askew died in agony, but she did not die in defeat. Tudor England killed her to silence her. Instead, they made her immortal. They expected her to vanish from memory the moment the flames consumed her body. But the opposite happened. Something in London shifted after Anne Askew died. Something subtle yet unmistakable, like a breath held in the lungs of an entire city. People walked differently, spoke differently. They passed the place of her burning with downcast eyes, and some, even those who once feared touching anything associated with heresy, found themselves whispering a prayer under their breath as if the ashes still held the power to listen. 4 days after her execution, a strange silence lingered around Smithfield, as if the ground itself remembered the weight of the chair that held her broken body. The market stalls nearby opened as always, but the vendors noticed that their voices did not carry the way they used to. The laughter of children seemed distant. Even the cawing of the ravens softened, as if they sensed that a death had occurred that had unsettled even creatures accustomed to feeding on the fallen. Those who had witnessed her final moments could not forget them. There were men in that crowd who had seen soldiers butcher enemies on the battlefield, who had watched criminals swing from gibbets, who had heard the screaming of plague victims in the dead of night, yet none of those memories clung to them the way the sight of Anne Askew had. There was something unnatural about the calmness she carried into fire. It burrowed beneath the skin of those who saw it, haunting their sleep, making them question the authority of the very crown they had sworn loyalty to. If fear was the weapon of tyrants, then her fearlessness had struck a wound deeper than any rebellion. In the court, the mood turned brittle. The men responsible for her death carried on with the business of the kingdom, yet beneath their polished words and ceremonial gestures lay a quiet panic. They tried to reassure themselves that they had acted in accordance with the law, that her suffering had been necessary to maintain order, but these assurances rang hollow. The image of her broken frame being lifted into the flames returned unbidden to their thoughts. Her silence in the face of pain mocked their power more loudly than any shouted defiance. The Lord Chancellor, who had once believed himself immune to guilt, found his hands shaking when he signed proclamations. The Archbishop, a man who had ordered countless punishments with unwavering confidence, began to question whether the divine truly sanctioned the cruelty that had unfolded under his command. Even the king, who prided himself on being the ultimate judge of his kingdom, could not entirely escape the unease that crept into the edges of his mind. He never spoke her name again, but he felt its echo whenever he passed through the council chamber where her interrogations had been planned. The Tower, too, remembered her. Guards began to report odd sensations during the night watch. Some spoke of sudden chills in the corridor where she had been kept. Others claimed to hear faint footsteps behind them, though when they turned, no one was there. One guard, a man too seasoned to be frightened by anything human, swore that he saw a shadow move along the wall without anybody to cast it. The wardens dismissed these tales, but privately they avoided her old cell after dark. Fear, once awakened, did not die easily. Her writings, scattered across London like forbidden seeds, took on a life of their own. Pages that had once been ignored were now whispered over in secret gatherings. Women who had never been allowed to read scripture found themselves inspired by her clarity, her conviction, her refusal to bow to a world that insisted on her silence. Some risked imprisonment just to copy her words, believing that preserving her voice was worth any danger. Each line she had written became a spark, igniting quiet rebellions in the minds of those who felt unseen by the kingdom that ruled them. As for the men who tortured her, the weight of what they had done grew heavier with each passing night. One of the interrogators took ill, insisting that he heard her voice every time he closed his eyes. Another begged the church for forgiveness, though he could not bring himself to confess what he sought forgiveness for. A third, unable to escape the memory of a broken body on the rack, fled London entirely, abandoning his position and leaving no trace behind. It was said he wandered the countryside speaking to no one, a ghost among the living. The surgeon who tended to prisoners in the tower confessed to his apprentice that Anne Askew had endured more pain than any body should be able to survive. He said her bones were so displaced that they should have torn through the skin. Yet she had remained conscious, fully aware, even articulate. He could not understand how she had held on to her dignity when every force in the world had tried to rip it from her. He told his apprentice that she had ascended the stake, not as a prisoner but as something transcendent, something beyond the reach of men. London fathers spoke of her in taverns, not with the mockery they usually reserved for women accused of heresy, but with a strange respect. Mothers whispered her name to their daughters, not as a warning but as a reminder that strength could come from the least expected places. Children who had never seen her execution fashioned stories about her, turning her into a figure that hovered somewhere between saint and spectre. Legends grew quickly in London, and she became their centerpiece. The city that had once ignored her now carried her as a weight upon its conscience. Even nature seemed unsettled. Storms rolled over the Thames more frequently that summer, violent and sudden, as if the sky itself recoiled from the injustice. The river swelled, dark and restless, and some said that whenever lightning cracked across the city, it illuminated a shape standing on the scaffold where her life had ended. Of course, such stories were dismissed as superstition, but London was a city built on superstition, and fear is the finest fuel for myth. In the rare quiet hours before dawn, when the streets were empty and the air was cold enough to bite through wool cloaks, ragged figures were known to approach the charred ground where she had burned. Some prayed, some wept, some simply stood in silence. A few pressed their palms to the earth as if trying to feel the pulse of her courage echoing through the soil. They said the ground was still warm weeks after the execution. They said her strength had soaked into it. The court tried to stamp out these stories, but the more they tried to silence her memory, the louder it grew. Anne Askew had become something that no king, no council, no church could control. She had become a symbol, a martyr not sanctioned by the clergy but by the people, a reminder of the cruelty hidden behind the mask of righteousness. Her death had been intended as a warning. Instead, it became a question: how can a kingdom built on the fear of its subjects withstand a subject who no longer fears it? In the years that followed, her name resurfaced again and again, usually whispered, occasionally spoken boldly. Reformers cited her as an example of injustice. Writers turned her final moments into allegory. Even some priests began to soften their sermons, no longer speaking of fire as a holy instrument. Her execution, once seen as necessary, gradually came to be viewed as shameful. And though the monarchy survived, though the church endured, both institutions found their power permanently stained by the cruelty inflicted on one woman who refused to surrender. An Askew story is not the story of a kingdom. It is the story of a single soul that revealed the weakness of a mighty empire. Her tormentors wielded authority, but she wielded conviction. They commanded fear, but she carried truth. They burned her body, but they could not extinguish the force she unleashed. And so her legacy lingered, long after the flames died, long after the men who condemned her had turned to dust. She lived on in every whisper of defiance, every quiet act of courage, every woman who dared to speak when told to remain silent. Her death was meant to be an ending. Instead, it became something far more dangerous. It became the beginning of her immortality.